Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 26th of May, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm joined today by David Scott. Welcome to the programme, David. How are things? Well, indeed, and we are going to highlight that by the Scott's Word of the Week, which this week is Hurley Hackett.
Children, or indeed maybe adults, sit on a sledge in a very steep hill and slide down, often in a procession, one after the other. And it's the word for the week this week, because the nature of Scottish politics has been very like that.
Well, indeed, and in fact, not just Scottish politics, David, as we're about to find out. Now, today, of course, Dave has gone to the G7. He's in Japan. And of course, it's not the G8 because Vladimir has been a very naughty boy. And so he's not invited to the party. Well, let's see. Here they all are around the round table. I'm not sure which one is supposed to be King Arthur. I guess it's probably King Dave. And you'll notice that Dave is looking in the wrong direction, which is probably quite normal. Now, Obama got off to a good start by lying through his teeth about a few things. So here's a couple of quotes. One of the benefits of the G7 is that you have like-minded countries who are committed to democracy and free markets and international law and international norms. David, this man's off his head.
Free markets! He shouldn't use big words he doesn't understand. Everything that he stands for, in fact, everything that all of those people stand for, is the very reverse of free anything. The only thing that's free is the things that they provide to buy votes. And that's not exactly free, it's just paid for with stolen money.
What about international law? Do you think he's an upholder of that?
Well, I don't think the people of Syria, or indeed anywhere in the Middle East, would credit him with that. And I don't really see much in the way of any first principles understanding of what lawful conduct is. Is he not the man who was executing extrajudicially his own citizens in Yemen using drone attacks with no due process at all?
Well, indeed, that's true. And as we reported yesterday or the day before, can't remember which, he's allegedly going to produce a report about how he did all that. We wait with bated breath to see what that is. He went on to say, so far we've discussed issues of the global economy and the need to continue to accelerate growth, to use all the tools at our disposal to ensure that we're not only putting people back into work, but also helping lift wages and helping to make sure we can maintain the momentum of the recovery that's taking place in the United States, most prominently, but also we're starting to see some progress in Europe. The fact that Greek debt crisis has been resolved for a reasonable length of time should help, but we've got a lot of work to do. And he went on to say we've a chance to talk about trade. We've had a chance to talk about trade, not only TPP, but also TTIP, and we recommitted ourselves to try to finish those negotiations before the end of the year. And he emphasised the importance of pushing back against either protectionism or competitive currency devaluations or the kinds of beggar thy neighbour strategies that all too often lead to everyone being worse off. So there you go. Now, just speaking of these free trade agreements, David, WikiLeaks, of course, published some of the documentation around the third of the big three, which is TISA. But nonetheless, Obama here once again demonstrating that the so-called free trade agreements are right at the heart of the policy agenda of at least the Western governments.
Indeed they are, and of course it's nothing to do with free trade. Free trade is very simple. You can buy anything you want from me, I can buy anything I want from you. It's called free trade. What we're talking about here is extremely severely regulated trade. Now, this is to the interests of the large corporations who can have the resources and the political pull to manipulate those regulations to their own advantages. It's not in the interest of the individual consumer because he pays more, and it's not in the interests of new business startups because they are excluded. It's a form of barrier to entry.
Indeed. Well, Abe himself, because as Obama mentioned, they were discussing issues of the global economy, and apparently Abe threw a graph at the other leaders, which highlighted what has been going on in the commodities markets over the last year or two. And really his message to them was that what is going on with commodities is a signal of a coming Lehman-style collapse. He must know this.
If Abe, as in Abe Economics, is actually the wisest man in the room, things are worse than I thought, Mike.
Yes, there's not much more to say about that. But let's move on, because of course I wasn't certain what they were up to here. The press release says they were planting some trees. I suspect there's perhaps skeletons under that lot, buried vertically or something, because the holes aren't big enough otherwise. But wasn't quite sure what they were doing. So I think we're gonna have to run a caption competition for this. So we want suggestions, please, and the best will be featured tomorrow. So what are this Shar up to? Any suggestions, David?
I would like to see a video version of that, and we could maybe put it to music. Chain Gang.
Chain Gang. Okay, brilliant. Now next, France. Obviously, we discussed this with Alex yesterday. The situation with fuel deliveries is already at a pretty bad state in France. I think a couple of days ago we heard that only a third of filling stations still had fuel. But now fresh strikes mentioned today. This time nuclear workers are going to join the protest. The various mainstream outlets saying that the French unions are going for broke, blockades, and the main union is the CGT. It's being described as a do or die strategy to choke off the nation's fuel supplies and energy supplies. Now, of course, this has implications for the UK as well, because we import a lot of electricity from France. About 7% of our electricity supply comes via the main trunks from the continental Europe, and particularly from France. So it's pretty lucky that we're heading into the summer when we have slightly less demand, but nonetheless, we don't have much overhead on that at the moment. So the union going for broke, and now nuclear power stations voting to join the gathering protests. There's an interesting article on Global Research here. This is something that Alex Thompson has been highlighting over the last 2 or 3 months, about how the French government brought in the state of emergency, effectively suspending the constitution in France following the Paris attacks, and that they were brought in for a set period of time, but that period of time just keeps getting extended because the French government finds a new excuse to extend this. This has now been extended as a result of these rising protests. So initially, it was the Belgian airport attack caused the French government to extend it. Then it was the Euro 2016, and now it's the protests that are causing them to keep this state of emergency in France. This is looking like all-out chaos, I mean, the French have a history of this type of protest, but actually there's something driving this, and we're hearing, David, from sources in France that there are police in and amongst the protesters.
Well, that would be quite common. We're seeing a lot of that, agent provocateur behaviour by the police. I'm amazed here, Mike, that this can be happening, because did our wise overlords not say that only if we left the EU would we be faced with uncertainty? We're meant to have certainty, and everything's meant to be reassuring. And what we're seeing is quite the reverse. Beyond the agents provocateurs, what is driving this? Is it a death wish on the part of the unions? I mean, do they not see the times they're living in?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't see any evidence from British union representatives at a high level that they have an understanding of what's going on around them. I don't imagine that it's any different in France. And of course, they are being driven, as are many players in the grand chessboard at the moment.
Yeah, yes, indeed, yes. It seems a very strange time for the unions to take such a move, and to push it. You know, this going for broke. What does that mean exactly? What are they going to break? How far are they talking about taking this? Are we talking about bloodshed? Are we talking about civil war? I mean, what does pushing it to the limit actually mean in this context?
Well, some commentators are absolutely saying that is what France is looking at the moment. So this is a colour revolution.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but perhaps Scotland has a history of association with France, so perhaps Scotland is preparing for something similar.
Well, we are. We've got the Police Scotland. Obviously, it's a major asset to the nation. Now, Police Scotland has a problem because there's not enough money to actually run Police Scotland. Here you see them. They prepare a small army, and this was a piece put on the BBC showing them basically storming houses. Automatic machine gun fire, grenade in the door, kick the door in, then you go. That type of house cleaning operation. It's infantry tactics, and they're preparing this for the inevitable, we are told, terrorist outrage in Scotland, which would also be the first time we would have needed anything like that in the history of the nation. But we're also seeing Police Scotland being sold overseas to try and bring in some money. We're advising some of the worst totalitarian dictators in the world as to how to run their police forces.
But surely
that's
Scotland is best placed to do that.
Well, yes, and it's bringing in a few bob, and there's a huge black hole in the Police Scotland budget, so you have to find cash where you can. We've checked down the back of the sofa, and that's all gone now. So we're looking at Middle East and third world dictators who need the skills that Police Scotland have to offer.
Such as?
Tricky. I'll get back to you.
Okay. Well, let's move on then, because of course at the bottom of this is economic reality, and not much sign of it on the Bank Underground website. Now, anybody that doesn't know, this is the blog site for the Bank of England, and they are discussing negative interest rates, life below zero, the impact of negative interest rates on derivatives activity. And this is a very interesting article, David. They say that in 1995, Fisher Black, an economist whose groundbreaking work on financial theory helped revolutionize options trading, confidently stated that the nominal short rate cannot be negative. 20 years later, this assumption looks questionable. 1/4 of world GDP now comes from countries with negative central bank policy rates. Practitioners have been forced to update their models accordingly, in many cases introducing greater complexity. But this shift is not just academic. Models allowing for a wider distribution of future rates requires market participants to hedge against greater uncertainty. We argue that hedging contributed to the volatility of global rates in early 2015, but the derivatives can also play an important role in facilitating monetary policy transmission at negative rates. And they then go through a brief history of negative rates, and they discuss various forms of derivatives and other financial instruments, including floating rate notes. And they say that floating rate notes are a good example. A buyer of a floating rate note receives a coupon that varies with interest rates. So what happens when rates become negative? Do negative coupons mean the investor has to pay the debtor? In practice, no. Legal and operational practicalities have meant that floating rate notes are effectively floored at 0%. So what's the point of them then?
It's also profoundly incoherent. I mean, it's loopy. We could have a whole hour on what's wrong with negative interest rates. Where to start? In reality, real interest rates cannot be less than zero, because what that would be is, that would be me saying to you, Mike, what would you rather have? I can give you £15 today or £10 tomorrow. Which would you rather have? And you would say, oh, £10 tomorrow. It makes no sense at all. The basic time preference, which is built into the nature of being a human being, means that real interest rates should be positive. Now, what's the Bank of England claiming to do here? Now, in reality, what it's doing is something else, but what are all the central banks claiming to do? This is to encourage borrowing. This is to force banks to lend to people who are so credit unworthy that you can't lend to them at zero interest rates. You can get the money for nothing. You wouldn't lend to these people. So if you get the money for a negative amount, do you lend to these risky people who are a bad credit risk? I don't think that's going to work. It's going to undermine the solvency of the banks because they're not able to keep money on deposit with the central bank and get free risk-free return, which is helping to bail out the banks. That's no longer going to happen. So where are the banks going to get that missing money from? They're going to get it from the spread between what they're paying depositors and what they're taking from borrowers. Well, they can't drive depositors' rates down any lower because they will leave. And with fractional reserve banking, if the depositors leave, then the banks have to call in loans. It's a mess. It's going to go horribly wrong. And what's it really about? It's not about stimulating the economy, because that boat has sailed. No one believes that anymore. It's about bailing out the government. The government needs to borrow money. Government's skint. And it needs to borrow money in order to keep this show on the road for another month, another year. And it needs to borrow the money very cheaply because it can't afford anything else. That's what it's about.
So how do we get out of this mess?
Well, I would look seriously, if you have any significant funds in a bank, I would seriously question whether they're safe. I think we have to start looking at this, at the solvency and reliability of the banking system as a whole now. You want to get your money into real assets, beware paper. It's a very, very risky time for anything financial.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, Scottish issues. The Scottish National Party. This is another lot. Is it unfair to say they're off their heads, David? Because we'd rather take selfies with Nippy than actually run the country.
Well, yes, people are starting to notice. This is the Scottish National Party. The gloss is worn off. The whole kind of National Socialism thing is starting to be revealed. This is an article from a former SNP councillor. Now, this man led a large administration in Tayside, so it was a regional council. So he was at one point probably the most senior man in the SNP with an actual political post running something. So he's extremely senior. Ewan Dow is his name, leader of SNP run Tayside Regional Council from 1994. Now, he's now describing this party, which he's devoted his life to and he loves, as resembling a cult with selfies. He finds there's no debate about policy. Things are all being dictated by the leader. And I would point out, if you are a nationalist and socialist party, having a cult surrounding your leader is probably not a wise move. And as a result, he's pointing out that profoundly unsound policies are being accepted and rammed through and imposed on the Scottish people. And he's had enough. He's not renewed his membership. He can no longer be associated with them. So you're seeing people, some of the old school nationalists, Jim Sills is another old school nationalist who is a very much a voice of reason that is being ignored by all the senior members within the SNP. You're seeing these old school nationalists who have a much more coherent view of what the nation is, being ignored amongst this cult with selfies. I think it's quite apt.
Earlier you sent me a video that we'd hoped to include today, but I didn't get the chance to include it. And so on one hand, we've got Nicola Sturgeon, absolutely, from this article, happy to have selfies taken. But when she is stopped in the street by somebody asking some serious questions, not only does she look very shifty and uncomfortable, but she didn't want to have the camera anywhere near her. She kept turning her back to the camera, and really didn't want to answer any of the questions. So bit of a dichotomy here between somebody who wants to have photographs taken, but at the same time doesn't.
Yes, well, this is the hard question that's been brought home to her in her own constituency, which is Govan Hill. Now Govan Hill has been described as a ghetto with infestations of rats and bed lice, and the people who live in this ghetto are looking to the political representatives to help solve the problems. And Nicola, who's the MSP for the area, as far as I'm aware, has never actually mentioned Govan Hill in Holyrood, and she certainly couldn't name one example when she's mentioned the area. She seemed very reluctant to meet the people who were trying to get something done, and as she drove off in her car surrounded by armed security, one of the locals was heard to shout, "Oh, there's no comment then. No selfie, no comment."
Okay. What's going on in the wilderness?
Well, again, the penny's starting to drop. This is Kenneth Roy, who's always excellent and very much worth a read. He's talking about the fact that some of the best and the brightest in the SNP seem to be getting expelled into the political wilderness. And Nicola is surrounding herself with her gender balanced. It must be gender balanced. This is an absolute, it must be 5 men, 5 women in the cabinet, end of. Her gender balanced cabinet, which seems to be containing at least 2 women who are promoted way above their ability. He doesn't name them. I would suggest one would be Angela Constance. And Kenneth Roy, who's been a long-time supporter of nationalism and commentator in Scottish politics, he comments here, "For the first time since it tasted power 9 years ago, the SNP has started to attract ridicule. This is often the first stop along the long road to nemesis, for which there are no free passes, merely a long, bumpy ride at the full fare. A long, bumpy ride downhill, as we started off with today."
Yes. Okay. Now, having babies in Scotland, is that easier than it used to be?
You would actually. It's a strange catch-22, Mike. If you look at the named person scheme and all of the surveillance, the state surveillance that you have to go through to have a baby in Scotland, you would need to be mad to have a baby in Scotland. But unfortunately, the SNP have got that one covered as well, because if you are mad, they will be monitoring you extremely closely, and they'll probably seize the child. So whether you're mad or not, you can't really have a baby in Scotland, and that seems to be catch-22. We've got a huge involvement here, all around the country, with mental health services becoming involved in midwifery and perinatal care. So if you are a woman and you have a baby, you are going to be questioned about your own mental health, and in fact the mental health of all your relatives, because if there's any mental health problems in the family, they will want to know, and they will monitor you very closely. We had an unbelievable discussion on BBC Radio Scotland this morning, where a doctor from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde was on the show, and he was describing his proposal to have pre-conception checks on the NHS, where you'll discuss with your GP and any other services that are necessary your fitness to conceive a child, your fitness to be a parent. This has clearly got troubling eugenics overtones, and is another step along the way to a completely total state involvement in family life, in the most private, in the most important decisions any couple are ever likely to take.
Yes, and if you're discovered to be, or decided that you're a vulnerable mum, you're going to end up in an institution.
Well, they're going to provide you with extra special attention. Now, one aspect of this that's particularly troubling is this is a Dundee initiative to tackle what they term as vulnerable mothers, young mothers. So people who might have a history of alcohol abuse or drug abuse or something like this, and they're encouraging them to come into this this unit, which has got a combination of midwife care, nursing care, mental health care, social work, and all of this under one roof. And they will find the best way to help the mothers cope or to take the child. And they do use the word take.
Alex is asking, is this a form of internment?
It's not actually, they don't actually lock you up. I think you can go home in the evenings, but it's certainly, I'll just read you a little quote here. It's called the New Beginnings Pregnancy and Newborn Support Service. It helps pregnant women and their partners where there are issues of substance abuse, learning disability or mental health. So if you're not clever enough, the Scottish State wants a close look at you if you're going to have a child. New Beginnings work with families to try and find the best way of caring for the children. It can mean helping parents to look after them, or it can mean the babies having to be taken away. Note, not offered for adoption, having to be taken away. There's compulsion here, there's no choice on the part of the parents, because the babies apparently belong to the state. The university report said families were often suspicious and hostile towards social workers, but they seemed more comfortable with the New Beginning staff who had the balance, who balanced the need to create a friendly atmosphere against the need to prioritise the welfare and safety of the children. So what I would suggest that is, Mike, is a con. That's a pretense to disarm the parents, put them at their ease, to make it easier when the state decides to seize the children, to make that action happen rapidly. I find that extremely troubling.
As we all should. Now, we're going to talk more about named person in a second, but just before we do that, I just wanted to say thank you to all who've donated or joined the UK column in recent weeks, and particularly to Dave, Mike and Mr. Bonnell. Thank you very much for your help. It's much appreciated. And let's just get straight on, David, with the next thing, because named person is related to what we've just been talking about. This is further expansion of the range of people that are going to be required, and I'm using that word, expected and required, or probably have the same meaning in this context, to spy on young workers. And this is Alice through the looking glass with her take on it. And there's another article here making the point that thousands aged 18 and 19 are included. So this does not end with you notionally becoming an adult. This 18 and 19-year-olds are included. And it's not just taxi drivers now, it's going to be other employers as well.
Yes, if you are a 16 and 17-year-old young Scot, and you have the right and ability to get married, have a child, fight and die for your country and vote, but you want a job, then the employer will be coerced into spying on you and reporting any concerns, gut feel, suspicions that your well-being might be in some way compromised to your named person, which will be some probably faceless bureaucrat in the bureaucracy, since you're not at school. It's not even anyone you know.
What I don't really quite understand is what the named person's role is once somebody is 18 or 19. Is this purely to make sure that that they're aware of any potential pregnancies among people at that age, or are they expecting to involve themselves in that person's life in some way? What is the role that they're going to play once a child is no longer a child?
Well, I mean, the named person under the Act is up to 18, so it covers up to 18 years, and Extending beyond that, it would be depending on circumstances. One of the circumstances is if the child has been in care of the state at any point during his or her life, then I understand that the named person provision then stretches out to the 25. So there does seem to be a bit of room for manoeuvre for the state to change the rules as they go along. But the basic answer to your question, what does the named person do, is something that the Scottish Government still can't give a straight answer to. I mean, they gather information, but to what end? They make decisions, but to what end? Ultimately, they have a great deal of freedom to make their own minds up about how other people, and we're talking adults here, live their lives.
So we seem to be having some personnel changes.
Everybody who has any association with the named person scheme has been, I think, redeployed.
So Angela Constance has been replaced with John Swinney, is that right?
John Swinney here. John Swinney doing the universal named person salute has replaced Angela Constance. John Swinney is viewed as a safe pair of hands. This is as safe and dependable as the Scottish National Party has. So he is, in Scottish terms, a big gun, and he's been placed over education because it's been going so terribly, terribly wrong.
Looking through his toilet roll telescope there. And Eileen Campbell replaced with Mark MacDonald.
Yes, Aileen also Campbell, who memorably said that parents also have a role in bringing up their children. She's gone. She's now, I think she got sport and public health, so I think that's probably a demotion. And Mark MacDonald, who's looking awfully happy here, he has picked up the brief for named person, so I don't think he'll be smiling quite as much now.
Yeah, and what about Joan McAlpin?
Well, this is interesting because this is a little bit of honesty. We don't get much honesty from our wise overlords, but this was in a debate and in the Parliament, and she said perhaps we should be honest about the breaches of privacy. The breaches of privacy for quite a lot of families. So she was pointing out, and she laboured the point at some length actually in this debate, that the idea behind a named person is that you intervene in family life before there's a problem. Right? You anticipate, you nip it in the bud is the extremely irritating phrase they keep using. We're going to nip it in the bud. Don't know how they're going to do this or what wisdom they're going to apply to do it, but that's what we're going to nip it in the bud. So she recognised that that means intervening in family life when in lots of cases there'll be nothing wrong. So that's a breach of privacy, and she had at least the wherewithal and courage to state it.
Yes, okay, and we've got a named person, a noted named person roadshow coming up on Monday.
Yes, Monday evening in Crieff in Perthshire is the next roadshow, so anyone in commuting distance of Crieff, hope they can make it along.
Now, David, you seem to have been a naughty boy because you tweeted out some information about a celebrity threesome, which I'm not allowed to comment on.
No, you're not. I was making a serious point about the nature of the Supreme Court decision. I noticed that our colleague, Mr. Gerrish, was no longer in England. He was in the United States, and I was in Scotland, and that in both Scotland and the United States, the name of the two names of this celebrity couple, which is redacted here, could actually be discussed openly. It's been in the front pages of Scottish newspapers, after all. So I tweeted to Mr. Gerrish this information, and then in a subsequent tweet, I said that presumably he could retweet that if he chose to from the United States, but when he came back to England, he could not because he'd be bound by the injunction. Maybe I was wrong in that. I'm not quite sure. He might need to take legal advice.
But quick as a flash, you got an email which said, "Dear Twitter user," so they don't even know who you are. We're writing to inform you that Twitter has received legal correspondence regarding specific content posted on your Twitter account at Albion Rover. The complainant requests that the following tweets, allegedly in violation of UK law, be removed immediately from your account. Please confirm whether you will voluntarily comply with this request. Note, the Twitter rules state that users agree to comply with all local laws regarding their online conduct and acceptable content. Please also be aware that abusive behaviour may lead to your account being suspended. If you believe we have contacted you in error, please let us know by replying to this email. This notice is not legal advice. You may wish to consult legal counsel about this matter as a matter of urgency. Well, you did respond to them.
Well, yes, I did respond, and I pointed out that this UK law that he refers to is a strange concept in that it doesn't exist. We have two legal systems in this country. We have Scots law, and we have the law of England. And I'm resident in Scotland and bound by Scots law. And if they can provide proof of claim that I've in any way contravened any aspect of that, I will, of course, immediately remove the tweet. But as I said, this information has been published on the front page of a Scottish newspaper. It is openly discussed in Scotland without any restrictions. And they seem to be confused as to the jurisdictional issues here. And rightly confused, or understandably confused, because how can something like Twitter be controlled from a court in London? They can perhaps control the press within their own jurisdiction. But this is an international electronic media, and one person sitting in one part of the globe, free to discuss this, cannot be affected by the decision in London.
But of course, that's what this is about, really, isn't it? Because this is about building up a problem, a propaganda case to justify some form of global legal jurisdiction with regard to the internet.
That is the worry. That is the worry that we get the sort of nonsensical legal decisions and legal positions that we see in some places in the world starting to multiply. We have a situation in America that it's a federal crime to contravene any law from any jurisdiction anywhere in the world regarding flora and fauna, right? I don't know if you know that, but it is. And in Guatemala, it's illegal to have a short lobster, a lobster below a certain length, in your possession. That makes it a federal crime in America. It doesn't matter if the lobster's alive or dead. If it's dead, it doesn't matter if it died of natural causes, or if you killed it in self-defense. It's still a federal crime. So we can get to a point where laws abroad will start to affect us in ways that we cannot understand, we cannot predict. And it allows people to be silenced, it allows people to be intimidated, it allows the law to be increasingly used for unlawful purposes, to close down debate, to eliminate freedoms, and to protect the guilty. And that's the worry.
Somebody in the chat box is asking which newspapers in Scotland have published these names.
I don't recall actually, but it was a front page. It'd be the Daily Record or something like this. It'd be a front page of one of the big ones. So yeah, it's. I'm sure a Google search will find it.
Well, possibly not, because of course that's probably restricted. But anyway, Rotherham. Speaking of legal issues, so International Business Times here suggesting that £500,000 in legal aid has been paid for this for the defence of this paedophile gang.
Yes, and they spent £2 million prosecuting Robert Greene in Scotland for trying to prevent paedophile abuse. So the waste of money is very striking. We're not spending anything on helping the victims. We're not spending anything on eliminating this problem. We're not spending anything on stopping the cover-up, but we are spending quite a lot in some very, very surprising places.
Indeed, and one area that we're not spending any money is protecting missing children or preventing children from going missing in the first place. The National Police Chiefs Council tweeting this out this morning, and to be honest, I was ready to put my foot through the screen when I saw it. Quick and effective risk management is key to getting our response to missing children right. That means having the best quality info possible. And I'm not going to say too much about this other than to remind everybody that this particular issue is one that we've been trying to highlight for 2 or 3 years now, that there are no proper statistics kept on children going missing in this country. We know that there are over 100,000 children go missing in this country every year. The vast majority of them come back home, but we don't know specifically what that majority is because the statistics aren't kept. There's no central record kept of children that go missing from their parents' homes or from care homes or from foster homes. We don't know what happens to the children that don't come back. This is an absolute national scandal. And so for the National Police Chiefs Council to tweet this out today is frankly disgusting.
And we see also the agenda here. We need the best quality information possible. That means it's all about big data. You know, that's how named person is now being defended in Scotland. All the other arguments have really fallen by the wayside, and they're going on the lines of it's child protection, and we need big data. We need to know everything about everybody in order to protect the children. And of course, when they do know everything about everybody, they will not protect the children, because they could protect the children now if that was the motivation.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely right. Okay, so Hugo Swire, who is the Commonwealth Minister, was speaking at Chatham House yesterday. The speech was mainly about the EU referendum. And of course, he is part of the Remain camp and suggesting that the Commonwealth really will benefit if Britain stays within the EU. But I just wanted to pick out a couple of the things that he said that are quite interesting. He said the government has made it clear that the Commonwealth is of immense importance to the United Kingdom. No matter how you look at the relationship, historic, cultural, or our personal ties, our connection with the Commonwealth is stronger now than ever. The fact that Commonwealth citizens resident in the UK have the right to vote in the forthcoming referendum shows how close that connection is. No, Mr. Swire, that shows what a bogus referendum this is. The fact that foreign nationals, including those from Ireland, are allowed to vote in a referendum which has got absolutely nothing to do with them. Am I wrong, David?
No, it's clearly another attempt at just massaging the answer a little bit. We've been through this once in Scotland. We feel we've got the T-shirt and a few campaign medals on this whole referendum thing. The idea in Scotland was, well, we'll let the young people vote because they're easily persuaded to be nationalistic and naturally sort of patriotic, and they'll be more willing to change. So the nationalist government decided to lower the voting age to 16 for the independence referendum, only to find that the 16 to 18-year-olds actually voted to stay in the United Kingdom, much to their surprise.
Yes. So Mr. Swire went on, our commitment to the Commonwealth is clear. A large part of the UK's aid budget is spent on Commonwealth countries, 1.88 billion in 2013-14. Now, if you want to try to understand that a little better, watch yesterday's UK Column News, because we were talking about this with Vanessa Bailey and Alex Thompson. We remain the largest contributor to the Commonwealth Secretariat, and we're looking forward to hosting the first ever meeting of the Commonwealth Trade Ministers in 2017. And the Commonwealth itself is thriving. From 8 member countries in 1949, it has grown to 53. It now covers nearly a quarter of the world's landmass and more than a third of its people. And he went on to discuss the idea of a Commonwealth free trade area. And I'll refer everybody to the discussion about free trade that we had a few minutes ago, David, because of course we know what that means. He then said that the United Kingdom has been at the forefront of efforts to deepen the EU's trading relationship with Commonwealth countries. We were instrumental in getting the Commission's agreement to begin negotiation on free trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand. We continue to push for an ambitious free trade agreement with India, and the UK has consistently advocated a pro-development trade policy arguing for generous market access to the EU market for developing countries in the Commonwealth and beyond. And he summed up by saying the UK is and always has been a nation of traders, reaching out to all corners of the world. The Commonwealth is a vibrant, impressive institution with 2.1 billion people and enormous potential. And of course, this is something that we have been highlighting time and again on the UK column, because multiple paths lead to one world government. One world governance is really what we're talking about here. And the Commonwealth, well, the question that the Duke of Edinburgh and his CSE leaders body and the various other pro-Commonwealth, pro-global governance organisations are asking is, which is the best path to one world governance? Is it the United Nations, or is it the Commonwealth? I think the Commonwealth is extremely important in this regard, David.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and it's not an aspect that I've really studied before, and it's something I'll make a point of looking into, that aspect of it. The idea of free trade is first class, and you look at the problems in so many places in Africa that could be hugely improved if the rich countries stop giving them things. We don't need bailouts, we don't need handouts that just destroys the local economy. But just allow them to trade, allow the products into our country, and allow them to work their way through the assembling capital, developing abilities, and building their nation, and stop excluding them.
You can't do that. That wouldn't allow the megacorps to go in and plunder their natural resources.
Well, yeah, but the very core of free trade has got to be thou shalt not steal.
Yes, indeed. Now, I'm going to apologise for this graphic because it appears I have not sorted out the text on it, so I do apologise. The person that's there is in fact Andrea Leadsom, and she, of course, is responsible for shale energy in this country, and she was highlighting the government's vision for shale gas at the Shale World UK 2016 conference in London. Now, this actually took place last week, but they just released the text of her speech late last night. So I just wanted again to highlight a few of the points she was making. She says that shale is a fantastic opportunity for the UK. It will create a significant number of local jobs, meaning financial security for hardworking people and their families, boost our economy and strengthen our energy security. But let me be clear, safety is my absolute priority, she said. She went on to say the UK's regulations are some of the strongest in the world, and with over 50 years of successful and safe onshore and offshore oil and gas extraction, I'm confident that the protections in place for the environment and for people are totally rigorous. So she goes on to really sell shale gas in the first part of her speech. And then she says that safety, this must always be and will always be absolutely paramount. And she's telling us about how the Environment Agency aren't going to grant permits unless the risks to the environment and groundwater are considered acceptable risks. Then she says, but having a world-class regulatory regime is not enough. We need to challenge, she says, we need to challenge the misinformation about the industry which is being spread and clearly explain that shale exploration will always be conducted safely. Therefore, the second critical factor in developing a successful UK shale industry is public engagement. Government needs to provide scientific and objective information to the general public. Now, based on what I've just said from her comments up to this point, do you think she has any kind of objectivity in mind, David, when she talks about public engagement?
I think she means the science is settled. The debate is over. The science is settled. And that, of course, is a phrase which translates into English as I have no logical arguments.
Right. So let's continue. Because she then says that she has to make sure that the shale industry has the tools it needs. So they have to make sure that those most affected by shale gas activities see benefits too. So by the tools that the shale industry needs, first of all, she's talking about planning. And she's saying that they're going to make sure that the industry has the right conditions to succeed. She's going to say that, she did say that with the potential for shale gas to support our energy security and help create jobs, the government is understandably keen to press ahead and get exploration underway. So they're going to deal with any silly local authorities that get in the way by putting them in the position that if they don't deal with applications for planning applications for shale gas within the statutory time frame of 16 weeks, that these local authorities are going to be identified as underperforming. Oh my God, I'm sure they're going to struggle with that brand, seared into their foreheads. But anyway, she then goes on to say that the government is welcoming the shale gas companies' commitment to make set payments to communities that are affected by this, which could be worth between £5 and £10 million for a typical 10-well site. And they want to see these companies go further. So basically, she's really happy that the shale gas companies are going to try to bribe local communities into taking money in order to have shale gas there. And on that note, we've lost David. So we're going to see if we can get him back. Theo, any chance? No, okay. Okay, well, look, anyway, so at the end of this program, we are going to play out Ian Crane's Dash for Gas documentary. So that's going to come on straight after the UK column news if you're watching the live stream. I do suggest you watch that because you're probably going to get a lot more objective commentary through that documentary than you will from the government. He, of course, was in Australia when he recorded most of that, particularly in Queensland and New South Wales, where they have a lot of history of shale gas development and the impacts on the environment. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to get David back again. To be honest, we were pretty much finished with today's news anyway, so I think we'll leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us today. We will be back at 1 o'clock as usual tomorrow with Mark Anderson. See you then. Bye-bye.